a little after 3. Let the record show that all board members are present except for Dr. Graham. She's going to be a few minutes late. So I guess we're here to go over the budget again. Okay, Josette, you're on.
I think we should do a budget every 2 years.
Okay, so
Go ahead, Ms. Bell, you go ahead and read them.
item 1.3, Ms. Josette Shaughnessy, Vice President of Financial and Administrative Operations, will brief the Board of Trustees on the budget development process for the fiscal year 2020 to 2021.
The word brief.
We have 1 hour.
So I'll take you to the very last slide.
Okay.
So that says thank you very much for your attention. But anyway, good afternoon, members of the board, Dr. Sadaka, and serving, our my esteemed colleagues, and we also have some other guests here that are going to be a resources for to kind of help me out in some of the explanation if you have any more questions, because every year our budget process is a little different. And so this, if you recall, back in 2016, the board approved a plan to increase tuition every 2 years. And so we are on that cycle. And believe it or not, we're already at the end of January. We're going to hear the result of the audit for last fiscal year, and we're getting ready to embark into next fiscal year. So we always have, 2 or 3 overlapping years that we are working with. The agenda is again, as I said earlier, and as I heard Mr. Hagley say, is be brief. So some of the information you have in your paper presentation is further information. So I won't spend too much time on it unless you have specific questions. This is also preliminary, by the way. This is also to come forward with some scenarios of tuition increase on which you would vote in February when we come before you for the final recommendation. And so this information, again, is preliminary. We're just tweaking the numbers. But what you have in your packet is I'm going to discuss the budget development process very quickly, strategic planning for 2021, and of course, we always plan beyond that. Overview of the revenue sources for this current fiscal year, because that is the basis for the next year revenue. The adopted budget, we'll have a lot of information on the adopted budget and the detail. The overview of the projected revenue for next fiscal year, for this fiscal year. And then tuition increase scenarios that I will spend a little bit more time on because there's an additional ingredient to that tuition increase that we want to discuss with you. And then we'll review our budget strategies for next fiscal year and the next steps. The budget development calendar, as usual, February marks the kickoff of our budget development process with budget workshop that Ms. Teges and her staff presents to the budget heads and their support staff. And by the way, Ms. Teges is here today. She's assisting me, and as well as Mr. Flores. And I've also asked, besides Dr. Gonzalez, Mr. Felix de Rosa, our Director of Athletics, and Amy Goldner, who works in the athletic department, to be a resource for any questions you may have on some of the information we're going to present. February, the budget requests have to be completed by all the executive levels, so vice presidents that are here in the audience, I know you're already aware because you already got your memo from Ms. Teges. March 13th, Friday the 13th, right before spring break, those budget requests are going to be due to the budget office. So magic day on Friday the 13th. March, April, budget office reviews and compiles the budget requests. Mid-April, we meet with the vice president to make sure that whatever they have submitted, that's what they meant to submit, and they feel comfortable with the information that the budget office compiled. In May, we review the preliminary budget with basically myself, Mr. Flores, Ms. Teges, meet with Dr. Serrata, and we go over the revenue projections, the preliminary budget requests, any kind, so there are no surprises. And then you know that May, June, July, that's pretty much the marathon of budget workshops to the board, whatever you choose to have during that time frame. And August marks the adoption of the budget by the board trustees. So you're going to see that those 8 months are going to go really, really quickly. We already talked about the budget development process that started in February 2020. Current fiscal year revenue, I'm going to be the basis for revenue projections. Now, 2021 marks the second year of the biennium, which means we have no additional funding from the state. Okay. Our next legislative session will be working on the 22 22-23 biennium, and they will be, let's see, 22-23 biennium. So really, right now, we don't, like I said, we don't have any additional funding from the state, and hopefully we don't anticipate any decrease in state funding. As far as we know, everything is going well at the state level. We are still struggling. It's a challenge with the enrollment decline in non-dual credit students, or your non-pay, your decline in your pay student population, and we have a very healthy economy, as you're very much aware. And so obviously, there are some efforts that are being made to try to attract more students coming our way. The 2021 budget is going to be based on the rollover, as always, so there's really no surprises there, and then additional requests are always considered for essential needs. So those requests are always very scrutinized, and we'll talk about that much later into the process. And as always, and as a kind of a consideration to our faculty and staff, we do evaluate compensation to remain competitive in retaining faculty and staff. So I talked about the strategic planning. One of the things that we want to be very much aware of is, because we do have a challenge in our continuing low unemployment rate, which means less students are coming our way because they'd rather be working than coming to school. If we have a decrease in enrollment during this year, which we are starting with the spring mini-semester, that's going to continue through the regular semester, spring semester of 2021, during that time, those contact hours are going to be reported to the state, as always, and other ones that are considered for state funding. So that is really, we always strive for additional enrollment, obviously, but especially during this year is very important because it is very critical to our funding.
How did we do in the fall? Did we meet our quotas in the fall?
Did we meet our what?
Our students in the fall.
Projected
I
student
think
growth.
we were a little bit lower than the previous fall.
And
So
what's
we did
it-
have a small decline.
And what's it look like for the
We were at
spring?
30%.
Spring as of this morning, we were up 3 students for spring as of this morning.
At least we're up.
We were up students, what Ms. Shaughnessy's referring to is the contact hours. So dual credit students take fewer courses, and so the contact hours from base year to base year was up, from this year to last year was slightly.
So when we
That
look-
brings up the next question.
Yes, sir.
Are we doing everything possible? Are we putting the primary emphasis on going out to every one of the schools? Is there more we can do there?
Always, and we will. Always more we can do.
And that's the thing is about the enrollment. Obviously an enrollment increase in terms of count is important, but also we want an increase in contact hours
Correct.
and credit hours. We get funded based on contact hours, and our tuition is depending on credit hours. So you could have an increase in enrollment, but if those students are taking less credit hours, then that means less tuition. So those are the kind of things that we have to contend with.
So when we talk about all this, we should always talk about credit hours, not student
Contact.
contact.
Contact hours, when it comes down to state funding, is based on contact hours. The tuition is generated through the credit hours, because we charge a tuition charge per credit hour. So the more credit hours we have, the more tuition we have.
Just out of curiosity, a student can get a refund on their tuition very early on. What kind of percentage do we see? Is it, I would really expect to be relatively low, but are we looking at 1 or 2% of tuition returns? Or do we even keep that statistic?
We do, and offhand, I don't know what it is, Mr. Uxer. What you're referring to is the refund. So before courses begin, students are entitled to 100% refund. Once we go into, there's a state refund percentage that we have to be at minimum, provide that, we can be more lenient. I forget what it is.
So we do
Thank you, Mr.
a
Davis.
75% refund after the first 10 days, and after that, next, like 5 or 6 days, we do a 25% refund.
Real large ballpark. Percentage of total revenue per semester. 1%, 10%?
Wow, that's a hard.
Yeah, so, yeah, we can find that.
I was just curious, 1 or 2%, I would expect it probably something like that, because I don't think there'd be very many people that will avail. But
There isn't, but it's larger than 1 to 2.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Probably would have to look at the enrollment on the first day of class versus the enrollment a little bit later, and then we can see what percentage change that is, and we certainly can look at that information.
Well, easier way to do it is just look at cash out.
Not really, because it has all kinds of combination of things in there. Yeah.
You don't label refunds and aggregate it on an accounting basis where you can identify tuition refunds.
The refunds net out to our tuition number.
Yeah.
And so you'll have 75% of a number that's refunded, but it's netting out into our total tuition number.
But you don't have an accounting database that can identify that code by student.
There is a code attached to drops and ads, so we would have to take all the ads and then all the drops and separate them.
Sounds like a project to me.
We can. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
We'll provide the data. There's no doubt.
It's a project for you.
I mean, if we're gonna go to this detail, we need to know, hey, we're looking at 100% tuition, and I don't see in this where if it's more than 1%, I don't see where you're taking, say, 5% off of the tuition, saying, okay, that money we're receiving, but because we anticipate contact, but we're not gonna get.
But the tuition revenue that we factor into our budget is net of refunds. So it's based on historical
Oh, okay.
net revenue. So we never gross up our tuition. It's really net tuition that you see there.
Okay.
But certainly, if you want that information, we can see how we can get it for you.
You're busy enough. I mean, if you net it out,
Thank you.
just,
Thank you. But no,
and when somebody needs some overtime, go ahead.
Let the record show that Dr. Graham joined us here today. Look like
Hello, I apologize, Randy Hanna.
You don't apologize to him.
No, to everybody.
so one of the mechanisms that we have to fund our budget is to look at tuition. And so, as I mentioned earlier, back in 2016, in order to have a more predictable source of revenue, so we just kind of go hit and miss every year, do we do tuition increase or not, and to make it also more predictable for our students, this board asked us to look at a 2-year tuition rate schedule, and so that's what we did. So therefore, this year marks that. That is the year that we do that. We do that every even year. We look at a 2-year tuition increase cycle. And then the other thing we have to plan for is for any operating expenses for the new facilities. So I know we saw that last year. You want again? Yes, because last year when we did plan for additional facilities, we prorated over the year based on when the facilities were going to become operating. Okay, so staff, supplies, additional utilities, so on and so forth. We put that in the budget, but it was prorated during the current fiscal year when those facilities were going to become operational. So now we need to plan for that remaining proration for basically for a full year plus a full year of fulfill plan. So that has to have to be taken into consideration when we plan for the budget that you're going to be adopting in August. And then we continue to evaluate that impact of GASB 75, and not just 75, by the way, 68 and 75. And you will hear from our auditor later on this evening when she presents the audit results and the kind of impact that we have, that the impact it had on our financial statements. It was very significant, but in spite of that, we were still able to increase fund balance. Yes, sir.
Good question, Dr.
Yes, sir.
Back there, we were talking about looking at the budget for the, increasing the operating budget for those people bringing on new facilities. And then there was a comment made that we're running awfully lean for existing facilities and the support staff with those. Are we looking at any kind of, I mean, as long as we're looking, we want to give the new facilities the best treatment. Are we going back and saying, hey, are we treating the existing facilities? The existing facilities are going to need more because they're older, and just by virtue of that, they're going to have more maintenance problems.
Correct. Yeah, we factor that into the budget annually as well. Do we do it at the level to do all projects at once? No, but we prioritize them and we go back and.
So you're happy that we'll be able to give appropriate treatment to the maintenance and everything else of the existing facility? Okay.
So you know this chart, so if you don't mind, I just we have to skip through all these charts unless you want something more specific, but as you can see, property taxes is still the main source of revenue. revenue, followed by tuition and fees and state appropriation. You have all these charts in your packet, you're very familiar with them. This kind of gives you some history in terms of the major revenue sources. So this one shows basically your state appropriation, tuition and fees, and public taxes as it relates to fall enrollment since 2001. So you pretty much have, close to 20 years of history here. And you can see what has shifted in terms of the funding sources. And mostly due because our state appropriation had declined over the years. This is another chart that you have in your packet, and that is the relationship between your enrollment and your unemployment rate history. So as you can see, as your unemployment rate goes up, you can see your enrollment goes up, and then vice versa. When the unemployment rate goes down, then the enrollment also goes down. So there is a direct relationship. In terms of local property tax rate, you also have that chart that shows you where we're at. You can see since 2002, our tax valuation and of course the resulting tax rate have been impacted, and you can see between 2002 and 2019 the significant increase in valuation. Resident tuition rate history, this is also the chart that shows you our tuition rates over time since 2002. And you can see when we started in 2016, having kept consistent with the tuition rate. We have kept our word to our students, even though we had some decrease in state funding. We have not increased that tuition rate in between or any time that we have a decrease in state funding. So since 2016, we've kept the same tuition rate for 2 years. 2018, we raised it again. We're in that cycle. And then going to the next 2 years, we anticipate to do the same thing. You also have a chart for the expenditure by function. This is the way that you adopt a budget, but you also have another chart in there that breaks it down between the type of expenditures. So your salaries, faculty and staff salaries, and benefits in terms of supplies, and so on and so forth. The one I'd like to concentrate is on this chart because it does impact our conversation. So this chart here shows the transfer. So as part of the expenditure by function, we do have a budget for transfers of $7.7 million, okay? We delve into that detail. I would say the majority of this budget is student-oriented. So the $2.4 million, which takes about 31% of that budget, almost 1/3, is for the TPay. And this is directly related to student aid. We are mandated by state law to set aside 6% of resident tuition that gets allocated. It goes over to the financial aid office, and the financial aid office then obviously awards based on need to those students that qualify. The other transfer that is also student-oriented is the technology fund. Some of that goes towards student technology, but also is to also support the technology throughout the district. Instructional equipment is another allocation that is related to instruction. And then you have the plant fund we talked about earlier in terms of supporting our operations, our maintenance and of our facilities. We set aside about a little over $1 million, and this is only for daily maintenance. It does not address major construction, major renovation, and that budget is our plant fund that is funded through budget surpluses at the end of the year that we allocate, and we're able to, and if I recall, there is an item in the presentation from the president regarding how much was set aside every year to the project reserve fund that has helped us fund major construction or renovation. Yes, sir.
Okay, out of those categories, either the names are either self-explanatory or I understand what they are, except I don't understand technology fund. What does technology fund cover?
So technology fund is a separate fund that we give an allocation of 1.5, and some of that money, like let's say $500,000 one year may go to we have a committee that reviews the needs throughout the district that is related to instructional technology, and Dr. Pinon can explain that a little bit more, which is more intimately.
Okay, so like a smart classroom up there.
Oh, correct.
Okay, so that's a third of that. What did the other minute?
Software, so the support for Blackboard, the support for Dr. Pinon.
So this is essentially your
Exactly. It's to support all of our enterprise level software, like
okay.
Blackboard.
But I mean, that fund is essentially your.
Correct.
Okay, got
transfers, if I'm understanding,
Just that
then
number.
we've budgeted for this fiscal year a certain amount, and we're thinking we're going above and beyond that, and so therefore, this is what we're projecting for the rest of this fiscal year on the
So-
transfers, on the
So,
transfers?
as part of the $147.8 million adopted budget, we set aside this much money out of the unrestricted fund that goes into these various funds.
Okay,
These various funds here, okay? So for example, the TPED is the unrestricted fund.
got it,
It
okay.
goes from the unrestricted fund into the restricted fund. The plant fund and the replacement fund, this is for our, our plant renovation construction, separate fund. But it's still funded through the unrestricted fund, the budget that you approve.
Okay,
The technology fund also goes to another fund. And by the way, whatever is not spent at the end of the fiscal year carries over to the next fiscal year. They never lose that money,
okay.
okay? This, yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Okay.
No, you were through?
No,
No.
but that's okay.
Oh, no, okay, well, these are nice, and I don't want additional, I like this, okay, and I don't want additional. But is this also available, online to us?
Yes, the
Okay,
budget book,
what
yes.
I would ask is that it doesn't take much more. You have a spreadsheet, okay? I would like to see a 20-year bar chart showing for each one of these, okay? Not to be published, not to be printed, but just as a follow-on, a bar chart behind each one of these graphs, so that if I want to, I can see it online.
Okay, so you want a bar chart?
Yeah, similar to,
In a bar as opposed to a
the,
pie chart?
yeah, similar to this kind of guy right here,
A history kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
20 years.
Sure, absolutely. So that takes me to the
20.
intercollegiate athletic funds and the student activities fund. Those two funds, the intercollegiate athletic funds, this money that you see here is right now what is budgeted in the unrestricted fund. That budget has been the same for maybe 3 or 4 years because this was dependent on high enrollment. And we have not touched it, even though this is not the amount that actually goes into the athletic fund, because what goes into the athletic fund is based on the enrollment. So when we created the athletic programs back in 1995, okay, back in 1995, the programs were created. Mr. Haggerty remembers that, okay. In 98, actually, the students approved, along with the board, approved a $3 athletic fee. Back in 1998, tuition and fees were separate. We had a tuition charge, and we had a fee charge for various fees. After there were some issues actually related to the technology fund with Dallas Community College, and it was deemed to be somewhat illegal or unconstitutional, and it was reversed later on. Under Dr. Rhodes, we went ahead and decided to combine the tuition and fees. So there was no more fee that was charged to the student for athletic fee, activity fee, but we still need to have that allocation. We still need to have that funding. So what we decided to do is that we would allocate $3 per student. We continue doing that, and then later on we also had various fees that were approved to go to the athletic fund to fund the programs. So today we still do the $3 allocation per student. Per year is about 48,000 students, and multiply that by 3. And then we also have a $2.50 per credit hour allocation. And that is based on about 400,000 credit hours. Okay. So that 1.2 million, that's a budget, but that's not necessarily what they get. Whatever they don't spend stays in the unrestricted fund. You see what I'm saying?
Didn't we do the same thing with technology?
Yes,
For the what?
that's what I was
With
gonna ask.
technology, didn't we have a
Yes, for the
technology
technology
fund?
fund, same thing. So we had a $50 technology fund back in 2001, $50 per student
And
fee,
we still
and
have
then
it.
we combined it, and now we don't do a $50 per student anymore. We allocate it based on the needs that are
So we
assessed.
we don't charge a technology fund to the
No, we
students.
do not.
So it's been
Well,
the
we-
same fee since the 90s, the $3? So 98?
Well, it's in the same allocation.
The same allocation?
But since then, we have also created another allocation that was approved by the students and by the board of $2.50. And I'll show you the history in just a little while, so you can see how things have progressed over the years.
So on the technology allocation, the original $50 we used to add, that is still being charged, but not specifically the $50, right?
Right, exactly. It's combining the
It's
tuition.
combined.
We don't call it technology fund, student activity fee, we don't combine. Internally, we do the allocation because we don't want that revenue to be lost for those programs. Now, the technology fund has changed because over the years, we have funded technology significantly. So now there's an amount of 1.5 million, but that does not mean that it could not be increased according to the needs that need to be addressed.
So on the athletic, then we're looking still at the $3 plus the $250
For right now.
for right now. What would it take to
That's
be
gonna be
able to
next.
increase that?
It's gonna be
So we
next.
can get a soccer team going?
Well, we're not addressing the soccer team, but let me tell you. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to show you that.
I'm with you on that one.
Half hour. So, student activities funds works exactly the same. Way back when a long time ago, the student activity fee of $5 was also implemented. So the students were charged $5, and then when we combined tuition and fees, then we continued the allocation. And then over time, we also added an additional allocation of $1.50 per credit hour to the student activity fund.
Correct.
So that they can fund their programs. The student clubs, the different activities
Right.
the Student Government Association has, the student unions.
But
So-
that pays for their travel as well.
Yes, it does
Pays
cover
for their travel as
Yeah,
well.
that's cover their travel, yeah, they have their own budget. And you'll see, by the way, in your financial statements, you will see all these funds.
Yes.
All these funds we're talking about are in your financial statements. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of that perspective because we're going to be talking about the athletic fee in just a minute. This here shows you the expenditure by expense category. So it's just your expenses shown differently. Here you saw it by function. Here you're seeing it by the type of expenditures. You can see your faculty salaries, your staff salaries. You take all those two together along with your benefits. That's 76% of the total budget. So when we have to cut the budget, we don't have very much to cut from other than obviously positions. Okay? Now we have vacant positions that will provide savings, and those vacant positions help us then plan for the following year. If we don't need the position, we don't fill it. That's just as simple as that.
What kind of equipment is covered under equipment?
It's departmental equipment. Some of that equipment actually is mostly the library, I believe. It's mostly the library. Ms. Diaz is nodding, and it's so your library books, those kind of things. So that's probably about half of that, I want to say. And another equipment could be in different areas that they have an equipment budget.
And on that travel,
Computers, I'm sorry?
on the travel allocation, does that include the board travel?
Yes,
Or
ma'am.
just the-
Yes.
The whole institution.
So, so travel, we call it travel, for lack of a better word, but it's really, attending conferences, training, those kind of things, of course, board travel. And the transfers, you can see it here also listed. What is here too also important to you is a contingency fund. So we have a contingency fund right now of $2.6 million, and 1.9 of that is actually the binary reserve. So the binary reserve that we've been trying, like our savings account kind of thing. Besides fund balance, we have a contingency fund that we can roll over from one year to the next if we need it. Okay. And if you recall, last year we decreased the contingency fund in order to fund, the different things that we needed to fund when you approve the budget. Okay. Okay. Benefits, you do have this. Just want to point out here, like I pointed out to the Tuition and Fees Committee, half of that $14 million is health insurance. So $7.5 million is what cost the college for health insurance, our portion of 50% from the state.
Excuse me, would you explain what the relationship is between that and Gatsby 75? I think.
Little bit, so in health, actually in that, so Gatsby 75 and 68, we actually don't budget for it. Because from one year to the next, we never know what's gonna happen.
Sure.
We just make sure we have enough fund balance to absorb it. So we don't, there's a relationship in the sense that this health insurance here is for our active
Current.
and retirees.
Okay, so that's an actual expenditure.
It's an actual expenditure. This is pay as you go, and this is for retirees and active employees. And by the way, I think the portion of that for retirees is about what? It's about $3 million, isn't it? It's fairly large.
It's a little bit more than a third of that.
Yeah, yeah. So for retirees, we're absorbing significant cost.
And for GASB 75, we absorbed $5 million into fund balance this year.
So this is a budget, this is not actual, this is the budget, but at the end of the fiscal year, when we have to book, see, a GASB 68 and 75 is always, it has to do with the unfunded liability for the pension and for the post-employment benefits, which is health insurance. So the unfunded liability that the state was carrying in the past, that has been passed on to all the entities. And this is countrywide, this is not just Texas, okay? And this year, we had to absorb $5 million. And I think for retirement, it was what,
It was 1.3.
1.3 for retirement, and then for health insurance was 5?
It was 5.
And this is based on the actuarial assumption that they make every year. And they also change, and you'll hear that from the auditors in a little while, because it's actually
Material.
pretty material, yeah. But, we have to do what we have to do, but we were able to absorb it for the fund balance. We had a very healthy increase in fund balance this last year, which helped kind of amortize that impact. It was kind of one-time impact. We hope that now that they have revised their assumption, hopefully they're a little more conservative than they were before, and so hopefully we're not going to see that next year. Yes, sir.
Who qualifies Social Security as opposed to TRS?
Social Security actually is only for those employees that are part-time, that can choose either between Social Security
Okay,
or
so
the
they still have the
part-time.
option.
It's only the part-time employees.
Okay.
Full-time employees, we do not elect Social Security. Any other questions? Okay, so revenue projections. Good news and bad news, but mostly good news. And so state appropriation, this is for 1920. Okay, it's not for 2021 yet, because we're still looking at the numbers, but this is going to be the basis for next year. So when we look at the state appropriation, we're not going to get more money this year, and we won't get any more money next year. Tuition and fees for this year, we are looking at a decrease of about, close to $600,000. And again, it has to do with the shift in enrollment demographics. We have less paying students as compared to early college, high school, and dual credit. Another exemption, good exemptions, all of those are part of that mix. But really the drastic increase is really in your dual credit and early college, high school. And what's happening is because they're exempted from tuition, if we don't have the corresponding increase in paying students, then you see what I'm saying? The scale is just kind of being tilted here, okay? We need to have a corresponding increase in paying students to make up for those additional exemptions. We get the tuition, and we also get, and then we have to decrease that tuition by the exemption. The other thing in the exemption is that we're also absorbing the $20 general use fee. So the $20 general use fee does not go into this fund. It goes into what we call the debt retirement fund to retire the principal and interest on our bonds. Okay, so maybe I'm not explaining that correctly because I see those. But what I'm saying is the exemptions is being absorbed by the general fund, by the operating budget, but the $20 general use fee is not offsetting that exemption. It's going as a revenue into our debt retirement fund as a general use fee to pay off the principal and interest, and so for our bonds. So in a way, we are somewhat subsidizing that, but the other choice is for us to absorb the $20 general use fee into operating budget, right? And not having it into the fund where it's supposed to be to retire the debt. So either way, you have to take care of it. Does that make sense? The good news is because we have enough general use fee to cover our debt, we always have extra in there. So if there is any fluctuation in enrollment, it will make up for that. Because we always have to cover our interest and principal, always. We don't have a choice. Okay? And we do have a reserve fund there in case we have an issue, but we never touched that reserve fund. So the winner here is property taxes. And why is that? So if you recall, last August, our effective tax rate was lower than we anticipated. Recall that? I'm sorry, the effective tax rate was higher than we anticipated. So got us a little bit closer to our cap. And we were thinking, what happened here? We don't understand. What happened is you have some of those uncertified certified property, you know, the valuation, but if you remember, the CAD is allowed, it has to certify 95%. Okay, they are allowed to have, as of July 25th, they are allowed to have 5% that are uncertified. Well, some of those properties were still under protest, right? So what the CAD did, because everybody's been complaining, you know what, you bring those valuations too high, and then we end up having those huge refunds. So what the CAD did is they were very conservative. They lowered those valuations, which caused what? The effective tax rate to go up. But they said, you know what, on October the 1st, if those valuations are still what we think they should be, that's how the tax bill is going to go out. So that's the result, that 1.8 is this extra revenue that we basically, that we had not anticipated before because it was not in the calculation, that now that the tax bill went out, when we booked the levy, because remember, when I put that 61.9, that was a budget that was based on the valuation. When the tax bill went out, we get the results of those tax bills, we have to book our tax revenue, and that tax revenue ended up being much higher than when we had projected. Now, the other good news is that 1.8 is net of $1 million that I have set aside in case we get hit with refunds. Okay? I know this is a lot to absorb. Does this make sense?
Are you anticipating any large refunds like we did before with?
Don't know yet. We're going to be meeting with the CAD in March. So at that point, we're going to ask them. That's the reason why here, when I'm showing this extra revenue, it still has about $1 million in there just in case.
In addition, Ms. Shaughnessy, so really you're looking at 2.8 million.
Uh-huh.
So essentially the CAD, that would equal 4.5%. So the CAD was over cautious by 4.5%.
But they,
And our
again,
tax rate went up because of the CAD's over
exactly.
cautiousness.
So the thing is, what's happening is they get all the tax entities that are complaining, why are you doing this, and why are you, because we get hit with those large refunds, but that's because they're not planning like we are. Because I always plan about $900,000 in our budget.
That's right.
Have we ever been, what's the most we've ever been hit on refunds?
Yes, we have.
No,
The
what?
largest amount.
Well,
What's
the
the
largest
largest?
amount, $571,000.
Okay, so you're looking at 2x over max, okay.
And that was the year that
Yeah.
Western Refining in particular had that reassessment of value. So you think of us, EPISD's 10 times as large, so theirs was 5 million.
So realistically, we're not gonna spend, realistically, we would not expect to see all that money go away.
That's
Correct.
correct.
That is correct, yes. Last year, I believe our total refunds were about 688,000, something like that, which is still higher than usual, but, you know, more and more people are protesting their valuations, so we have to be in touch with that. So, so as you can see, it's going to help obviously offset that decrease in tuition. Other income, the 500,000 here is really directly related to the decrease in interest rates for our investments. So we've seen a large increase, and then now the feds have reduced the rates, and so obviously the investment market is responding to that, which means that our investments that are put into very, very safely, by the way, very safely, we don't speculate with any public funds. We can't, and we would not, even if we could, we would not, because you really have to know what you're doing when you do that. But it's in tax pool, you know, Texas terms, so it's in government pools, or it's at the bank in flex repo, so it's very, very safe. So we don't see any decrease in principal, that's the main thing here.
What would be our overall net effective rate? 0.5%? 1%?
Oh, no, we're about, right now, we're at 1.7 maybe, what is on your financials?
Little less than 2. Little less than 2%?
No,
Probably.
yeah, less than 2%, yeah.
Okay, good, that's
For
good
a while,
enough.
it was a little higher, I think we hit about 2.25.
That's good enough.
What are we at?
1.64 at the end of December.
Let's go, yeah, close. So when we're looking at,
18 months.
when we were looking at funding our budget for $147.8 million, we're looking at getting an additional $780,000 when everything is all said and done, so $148.5 million. So that's important because obviously that's going to help us fund our budget for next year. You have this information here. This is just a distribution of the budget by executive level. And so you have this information over here. Just the tuition and fee structure here is Currently, you have this information. Two other fees that we will be looking at also increasing is a distance ed fee. Right now it's at $50 per course. And every time we've had a tuition increase, we've also looked at increasing that fee. And by the way, this is a continuing increasing population that is taking distance ed online courses. And the repeat fee, $55 per credit hour, this is meant to really encourage our students not to repeat a course for the third time, because if they do, this is what they pay per credit hour. That's very substantial. And we've seen that revenue go down, which we want to see. We want our students to be successful, we want them to graduate, we don't want them to pay that kind of money. As I mentioned earlier, the tuition rate is earmarked to the operating budget, and the general use fee is earmarked to repay the bond debt. So we cannot, that is not included in the overall budget. Yes, sir.
What flexibility do we have in that distance education fee?
Well, I mean, we have been increasing it $5 pretty much every time, and that would mean if we increase another $5 this time, it would mean about $153,000 more.
So if somebody takes in resident takes a 3-hour class, it would be roughly $375. But if they take it by distance, it's only 50. So in other words, we lose.
In addition,
No, it's in
to the
addition.
tuition.
Oh, is this in
In
addition?
addition.
Oh,
It's
okay,
per
so
course.
okay.
And it's per course, not by credit.
Okay, so there's a $50
Yeah.
fee to be able to use your computer from home.
And also, not just that, it's also because it also supports the Blackboard
Okay, yeah,
licensing.
that's
that we
fine.
have.
I thought it was in lieu of.
No.
Oh, okay.
In addition to.
So you have these two charts in your packet, and just to kind of give you some perspective on what is happening to our paying student mix. So if you look here at the history of the total enrollment from 2013 fiscal year to 2018 fiscal year, you can see that our student enrollment, paying student mix, that was about 85%, close to 85% in 2013, is now close to 73%. And then you can also see the increased enrollment in your dual credit and early college high school. And so it does make a difference when you look at your credit hours and the paying student mix. Now you look at it went in terms of credit hours in 2013, that population of paying students was 88.94%, so close to 89%, now it's at 79%. So just to kind of give you some perspective on how our tuition revenue is affected by that mix.
Have you had any discussion with your team as to what could possibly be a solution that could help offset that cost a little bit more?
Well, certainly, we could entertain maybe charging for the general use fee, because that is the general use fee, $20 per credit hour. We actually absorbing that, we don't have an offset with tuition. We are already charging the schools when our instructors are teaching those courses.
But we don't have too many of those, right?
It's
Now that we've
about
gotten more
$500 a year.
We have about $590,000 in reimbursement budget.
Yeah.
About 590 for all of them?
Yes.
Yeah, there's been a concerted effort, Dr. Graham, from Creed. I give them credit when they deserve it. Creed has put in about $1.7 million to help teachers in all of the ISDs earn master's degrees in order to be credentialed to teach dual credit. So we look at the mix on just tuition. If we were to break down the mix with regards to state appropriations, the dual credit student has the highest success rate of any of our students. And we do have about 12.5% of our state appropriations are based on performance-based funding. So that comes back into the institution as far as those students. Then we turn around and we look at the matriculation rates of those respective students. Prior dual credit students, even the early college high school, we measure it and we look at it for a 4-year period of time. We still receive 44% of those students that come to us and matriculate with us. And that never would 100% come to us, because many of them would be going to UTEP, regardless if there was dual credit or not. And then finally, of those 44%, currently their success rate is 90% once they get to us. So it is a change in the mix, but it's also an investment in the way that we see with regards to student success as well. Our graduation rate, among others.
Okay. So, this is really to give you the presentation here in terms of the reason why we are here today is to give you some scenarios of what we are looking at in terms of tuition rate increase, dollar per credit hour, of course it's going to translate in a certain percentage increase, and what would it mean in terms of additional revenue to the operating budget, to support the operating budget. So here what you have before you is about 6 different scenarios, starting with $1, which is not very self-sustaining, of course, and then going all the way to $10 per credit hour. Again, those are scenarios, so you understand the impact. So if each one of those scenarios you can see, and I know you can read, and we don't have very much time, but if you look at the very bottom row that says net tuition revenue that is generated, so for $1 it would generate $383,000 in 2020. For $3 it would generate $1,141,878. For $4 and so on and so forth. So you can see the amount of revenue that will be generated by increasing the tuition rate per credit hour based on these suggested scenarios here.
What was our last increase?
It was about
It was 11.
$11.
It was 11,
$11 and I think
For
14
resident.
and 40 for non-resident. Okay. The reason why you see the non-resident a little bit higher is because we try to have this more or less the same tuition percentage increase, so we are fair to both resident and non-resident. We have a very reasonable non-resident rate, and you have that information in your packet too that compares the non-resident rate for with other community colleges and with our local institution.
And we have about 159 students?
I'm sorry?
How many students do we have that are considered non-resident?
That's a good question.
159? I think I saw it somewhere.
1,600, maybe 1,600.
1,600?
Yeah. 1,600. So this bottom row here is very important. Because you see, based on what I discussed earlier regarding and Dr. Graham was right on target, which is, we're thinking about increasing the athletic fee. That's the reason why Mr. Inogosa is here, to make a case for his program, and certainly assisted by Amy and Dr. Gonzalez. But really, in reviewing the budget for the athletic fund, certainly the tuition increases we had over time have not really reflected the similar increase into the athletic fund, because what happens is anytime you have a tuition increase, then the scholarship that the athletic fund is awarding to the students, also that cost is increased.
So why don't we just look at this yearly instead of every 5, 6 years?
So, very good question, Mr. Haggerty. So some of the models we're going to be proposing is going to be we need to look at those models, okay? So if we go, every time that we have a tuition increase, then, because we know that cost is going to be passed on.
We're going to have an increase because we're going to have our 2-year.
Well, the reason was because in the past we did increase, let me show you. So we have this background with the transfer to athletics. Because we did increase at certain times to kind of make up for that cost in scholarship and other costs. So we did do that, but we haven't done it since 2015. And that's really, what Mr. Noah is saying is, since 2015, we increased in 16, we increased in 18, but I have not had a corresponding allocation to help me fund those scholarships. So this is what you have before you here, a little bit of history. We created the athletic program back in 1995. We had the implementation of a $3 athletic fee in 1998-99. We did an additional transfer of $1 per credit hour that was approved both by the students and by the board, 2002-2003. Then in 2009-2010, we did another 50 cents increase. And then in 14-15, we did a $1 increase. Okay, so now it's at $2.50. 250. And that generates, and I know this is a lot of information, it might be easier for you to look at your, and I have 5 minutes, there it is. And so I'm gonna try to make it as succinct as possible. What you have before you here is actually split in 2 sections. This first section here is to show you the different assumptions that are used to develop the model. And by the way, this model was developed after the conversation with Dr. Gonzalez, Mr. Novosa, Amy Goldner, us. We kind of looked at the numbers, and it may not be everything that they want, but it's a model that we're trying to, it's a model that shows, different, we can do different kind of iteration of increase, okay? So, and I'll show that to you in just a minute. So if we look at this section over here, this model here is developed based on the fact that we have annual credit hours that are net of exemptions, by the way, of 382,000. So 382,000 credit hours is the basis for the calculation of the transfer that's going to go into the athletic fund. And then we have an annual enrollment of 48,000, so that's going to be the basis to transfer for the $3 transfer per student. And then we have all these expenses that are going to be enhanced based on any increases, and this is reasonable. It's not optimal, but it's reasonable in the sense that we're looking at doing a potential salary increase. That doesn't mean you're committed to that, Mr. Haggerty. It just means this is just in case this happens. So we have to plan for, let's say, the next 5 years. Here, this is a model that has 5 years. And so 3% for salary increase. Of course, if you do a 3% salary increase, you have to increase
But
your
don't the
benefits.
salaries go up when we give a salary increase? Aren't that included in the second? If we gave a 3.5% increase in salaries, that's already done yearly.
But, no,
But it's-
correct, but the athletic
different
area
fund.
has to
Absorb that.
absorb that, that's
Yes.
correct. So remember that these were, so as a member of the board that was actually here in '95.
So it's all your fault.
No, no,
Well,
but when the community
no,
came
no.
to you, you'll remember that they said that these would be self-sustaining programs and that the
Yes.
board would not have to pay for them. You
Yeah,
realize that,
right.
correct?
And now we're up to 1.8 million? Wow.
But look at the academic outcomes those
Somebody
students are
sold us a
getting.
bill of goods.
Pardon?
It was supposed to be free, now we're up to 1.8 million.
Sir, have you paid attention to the academic outcomes that these athletes bring us?
I'm just telling you, when this was sold to the college, it was costing nothing.
Yeah, but I wasn't on the board at that time. You were.
I know, and I raised holy hell about it. It didn't work.
It probably won't work again.
My question in this model you keep talking about,
Uh-huh.
can't we do this on a yearly basis so that we don't come back here every 6 years and say, ooh, now we gotta raise it?
And that's,
Considerably.
see, okay, so we have not done it on a yearly basis like we should have done, but now we're coming before you, so we look forward to a more sustainable model for the next, Amy did a 10-year model, okay? A 10-year model asking for like maybe $2.25 per credit hour increase going into the general fund, but you have to, going into the athletic fund, but you have to understand whatever we allocate from tuition also impacts the operating budget. See what I'm saying? And you'll see that in just a
I
minute.
just want to know, Josette, how do we do this so that we're doing it every year instead of coming back every 6 years?
We get together and bring the plan over to you and have you approve it. That's how we can do it.
That's all I'm asking, is why are we coming, it's like
Sure.
when we used to buy all the cars every 5 years, why don't we buy 1/5 every year?
I hear you.
Instead of
And-
waiting?
I hear you. And Dr. Serata and Dr. Gonzalez, Phyllis, we sit on, and myself, we are on the athletic advisory committee. Back in July, we said we need to have a 10-year plan, so that's what we are working on. So we are taking some action to bring this information to you.
I
So
mean,
you
we've only
understand
been
the
doing this
impact.
since 1995, and now we're coming to the conclusion we need to do this?
But we
Moving
just have to move forward.
Yeah.
We can't be looking in the rearview mirror.
It's been 20 years.
I know.
So, I don't know know how much time you want me to continue with this. I mean, it could take some time to, you have the model before you. I'll be glad to go over it, but I know that you also have some guests that will be presenting. So I can leave that with you. I can show you the impact. But I'd like to show you, you have the model, you can look at it. I'll be glad to explain to you at the next budget workshop if you'd like me to do that.
Can you go over it in about 5 or 10 minutes?
Oh, I can do it probably in 5 minutes.
Yeah, let's do it.
5 minutes?
Can we do it, sir? Sure.
Okay. Well, I'm speaking already pretty fast. Okay, so this type of model also takes into consideration the fact that we have, that the athletic fund owes the auxiliary fund $1.5 million.
Are they paying on it?
They are currently, they are not, they have been paying on the softball field. They've been paying on this, but because they had to break even in their budget, they were not able to continue the loan. So that's the reason why we are obviously where we are today, to say, look, we need some help here in terms of, we want to make sure that the athletic fund does repay that loan. So how do we build a model that takes into consideration a ever-increasing budget with tuition increases and also has to repay a loan of $1.5 million? So this is what we are presenting here.
We can just write off the loan?
No.
No.
And my question also is what, you have to double it, because what you ought to be doing every year is putting money, because they're gonna be fixed again somewhere down the road.
That's what we're planning.
That is correct, yes, sir. And the model that ME built for 10 years does show any kind of upgrade on the field. So let me give you an example. This loan over here, the $715,000, this was to upgrade the baseball field that was done back in 50 years ago. I don't remember. The baseball field, but the baseball field was prior to that. So the $715,000 over here, that's to replace the existing baseball field that was built a few years ago, that was paid off. That loan was paid off. And then now we're having to upgrade that field. And that cost a little bit under, actually it was a little bit under $700,000. So
How much?
it was a little bit under, I think it was 600, it was about under $700,000, isn't that correct?
684.
Okay, pretty close.
And what I'm saying is we should be putting enough money aside so we don't have to go get one.
Yes,
So
sir.
when it needs an upgrade, you could say, okay, we're gonna take it out of
That's the
We
plan.
the
do-
field, fund.
We do agree with that. The thing is finding the balance where you also have to consider, because if I go, I mean, I know you're a little bit ahead, but you have to also consider the fact that, let's say that you set aside $1.15. So this model over here considers $1.15 increase above the 2.50 cents transfer, okay? At the end of this fiscal year, if you take into consideration the revenue that are currently generated, which is close to $1.1 million, it's like 1.2 million, all the expenses that are currently budgeted at 1.5, and that does include the baseball field, okay? It does include some of the baseball field expenses that are hitting this year. We would have a fund balance at the end of this fiscal year of $37,000. Well, obviously $37,000 you can do very much, right? But it's more like a break-even model, okay? If we are to increase the current $2.50 by $1.15, again, this is an allocation that would be taken away from the tuition increase that would go to the operating fund. We would end the fiscal year of 2021 at $81,998. And then in 21-22, we would be looking at an ending fund balance about $93,000. Now, in 22-23, this is when the next increase for tuition comes before this group. At that point, we can plan to increase that fee again to generate more revenue, and we can, so this is on a pretty much a break-even model. If we were to do the model that you are suggesting, which is to plan for, we're looking at $2.25 to on top of the $2.50.
What a concept, plan,
Yes.
plan.
Yes, sir. We are. We try. Okay, so just let me show you what that means though. because I think you need to see the entire picture, okay? So if we were to increase, to keep it at a break-even, more like a break-even, sustainable for a couple of years until we increase again in '22, then we're looking, let's say for an increase of $6, okay, tuition increase, the net revenue to the operating fund before we do a transfer to athletics is 2.2 million. You will have to take away from this, the $1.15 would be 439,000 that would go to the athletic fund, or 859,000 if you approve a $2.25 allocation to the athletic fund, which means that the general fund will only get $1.4 million, well, 1.8 under the $1.15 allocation, or 2.25 for under the $2.25 increase per credit hour. So what I'm trying to say is that it's not going to be substantial money going to the operating fund to cover our budget. You understand what I'm saying, Mr. Haggerty?
I'm having a hard time understanding. You have two different budgets. You got the athletic budget and you got the general budget.
Right, correct.
What I'm asking you to do is make sure that the athletic budget has enough money going into it. So when he comes in and says, I need another $800,000 for a field, there's $800,000 in the field account. That's all I'm asking.
I know, Mr. Haggerty, but then what we need to do is we need to take away from our own operating budget to cover that. We can't just come up with $800,000 unless.
No, but I think
You
what the
can
judge.
raise the fee.
Yeah, but I think what
Correct,
he's
I
saying
agree
is
with you,
raising
but
the
when
fee.
you raise that fee, it's going to impact the student. I think that's the takeaway from
It's gonna impact who?
the students.
What? Yeah.
Yeah. All I am trying to tell you is that whatever,
What
It
I'm trying to
depends
tell
on-
you is that we have to cover the cost of athletics. Somebody has to pay.
I
It's either
agree.
the taxpayer,
agree.
the student.
well, the taxpayer cannot.
Students
there's-
are taxpayers.
So that the only avenue we have is to increase tuition. So basically, what can this board agree to increase the tuition fee that the students can bear? So that's, every 2 years we look at that. What are we willing, what are you willing, absolutely, if you want us to look at, let's say, if we look at $10, at $10, we would get, at $10, we still would get at $2.25, 859,000 additional revenue every year.
So if we increase tuition, let's just say for the sake of discussion, by $10.
Yes.
Then you have that projection that would become part of the athletic budget.
Exactly, so 859,000 would go to the athletic budget, and then 2.9 million would go to the operating fund. Now, what happens here is that under $10 tuition increase, this is how much money would go to the general fund, 3.4 million. And then you have to look at our own budget, what is it we need to fund? So for 2021, I'm in the wrong, okay, at 225, you're looking at an additional 2.9 million of tuition, because now you have the allocation of $2.25 going to the athletic fund. And now we have a surplus of 4.7 million based on the revenue projections that we showed you, based on the rollover budget. And then we have to consider, if we are looking at a salary enhancement, we have to consider close to $3 million, and then $973,000 for our additional facilities costs. And this is only preliminary because we're still in budget development mode.
Ms.
So,
Hennessy, and
to show you, this is the whole picture.
right, if we were to consider the $10, do
Yes.
you have the comparability of what it would look like for EPCC and the other
Yes.
institutions?
Yes. So the $10 basically is, the other institution, I'm sorry. Let me see. So for $10, let me go back to
Yeah, compared to you.
this one here. So at $10, $135 per credit hour. Okay, $135, and then you would have to add, $135, that does include That does include the $20 general use fee, okay? So then if you compare 135 to, so it would be 1620, yeah, okay, 1620. So now El Paso is here right now. At 1620, we would be below Laredo. But Laredo, we don't know what they're gonna do in tuition increase.
Yeah, but
And
local-
South Texas.
And how about locally, because we're,
Okay, so
Previous.
locally,
Previous slide.
let me go back to that slide. When we go to that slide, let me see, I have it, sorry,
Right there.
right here. So locally, we're still within very, we're still the best value in the area. It's at 1620, and I think, I don't remember what the numbers it was.
1620 versus,
We'd be half,
Versus
approximately half the
5800.
cost of UTEP,
We're
and
still, we're still in the ballpark in terms of still being the best value in the region.
now I have a question for you, Coach. If we went in that direction of putting more money, setting aside, focusing on that, how many more students are you gonna be able to bring in?
With the current sports that we have now, we bring in 150.
And if you have
On scholarship.
and would that give you enough to create a soccer team?
A soccer team would be an extra number of people coming in because it's a different sport. But you have to remember that you can't bring in just one team. You have to bring in 2 teams with Title IX. So you let's say we bring in the women's team, 5 years. You have 5 years to bring in the men's team to be compliant. So you're.
Why 5 years?
That's the Title IX.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, but that doesn't mean you couldn't do it faster.
Oh, yes, I mean, it's gonna depend once again on the budget and actually the students who are gonna absorb that cost.
How many, do you have a rough idea of how many students we lose out of this community to go play soccer in other colleges?
Just based on our conference, Western Texas College, 40% of their roster is from El Paso. So we lose to Western College, we lose to Ranger, Texas, 12% of them. So we don't keep any soccer players in town unless they go semi-pro.
They don't have anywhere to go?
Yes, ma'am.
So that's quite a few young people. And would you be able to keep their GPA up like you do with the track kids?
Yes, ma'am. We're actually on a course now to where we're the only institution in our conference and in our region, and we're checking to see, make sure that we're the only national institution where the GPA for all athletics is a 3 or above. And we plan to hopefully get to 3.5.
But that's pretty encouraging.
1.8 million is not encouraging.
I'm looking at the grade point average of the
I'm looking at
students.
1.8 million in the cost.
I know, and I'm looking at the kids that we're losing to other cities or
We're not
other
losing.
teams.
They have the right to go wherever they want. They can join a league at the city league. But you're talking millions and millions of dollars. And how many is on a team up for soccer? How many on?
Soccer would be scholarship being 24. So you're looking at 48.
48 students, and you're talking millions and millions of dollars for 50 kids. It would be better to take that money and go out and give scholarships to 200 kids, and we don't have to water the field, we don't have to hire a coach.
We
It's
don't
not-
buy the fields right now, boss.
Doesn't make any sense.
It's artificial turf.
I know, because we paid
We're not watering the
800,000, we
field.
went and borrowed 800,000 to put turf on.
So
Because we didn't plan for the 800,000 25 years ago.
So this is the first review of the budget for the board. We will obviously come back in February. In the interim, Ms. Shaughnessy and the Tuition and Fees Committee will be meeting, and we will propose, as opposed to doing it annually, I had suggested, so we currently look at tuition and fees every other year as per directed by the board. I believe that we can look at, obviously, we need to do an increase for athletics, but then to put them on, I had suggested on a 4-year cycle. So we look at tuition and fees every 2 years if we looked at athletics, and have a plan to increase that allocation every 4 years. Mr. Hinojosa and Amy, as well as Dr. Gonzalez and their team, to be able to budget in that way, so that we're not looking at it we've looked at it once every 9 years and then every 6 years, to actually do it on a cycle where we're coming back to the board every 4 years and to plan it in that way, as opposed to annually.
Well, the good news also about doing it every 4 years or 4 years from now is that we also have that first loan paid off.
Correct.
So with that first loan paid off, that's gonna bring obviously additional monies. Or it's gonna reduce the expense.
I understand, but once you pay it off, you still should be putting that money into an
No,
account.
I
So when
agree,
it
but
comes
I'm
to
just
it
saying,
again,
yeah, I
you
know.
have the money.
But it's just, I just wanna make that distinction that after 4 years, that first loan will be paid off.
Right.
So it can be redirected to the same amount, it wouldn't be reduced, the same amount can be redirected then for, saving for the upgrade of the fields.
Plus, you can factor in the tuition that 50 students would bring.
For the summer.
Right, the city and facilities being.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. Since you
Thank
said
you,
so
Michelle.
much time. 5 minutes. Thank you, Ms. Shaughnessy.
So the meeting's adjourned?
For 5 minutes.
Right. Well, we have a
So
separate
this one is
posting.
adjourned.
So the
Do I have a
budget
motion to
meeting is
adjourn?
adjourned.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So wait.
Motion to adjourn.
All right.
So
All in
made.
favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. Okay, we're gonna call the meeting to order.
Facilities and finance.
We're running late, so everybody please take a seat. And I assume we'll get the city first?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So Ms. Bell will read item 4.1.
4.1, representatives from the city of El Paso will present the proposed co-ed development and explore potential partnerships with El Paso Community College.
Colonel Weston.
Yeah, thank you to the board. I'm Kerry Weston. I'm the Senior Deputy City Manager for the city. And we appreciate the opportunity to come and give a presentation in front of the board. As the item states, we'd like to give the board an update on the work that we're doing in the redevelopment project at Cohen, all that we have envisioned and what we're planning right now there. And then I guess the action part of this is to talk to the board about some areas where the city's interested in partnering with the El Paso Community College. With me today, I have Sam Rodriguez, our city engineer, who will give the presentation. I have Eddie Garcia from our Economic Development Department and Alex Hoffman from our Capital Improvements Department. So thank you very much.
My name is Sam Rodriguez. I'm the city engineer. Thank you for having me here today. I'm going to quickly go through the master plan. If you're not familiar with the development, we had a very robust public outreach to redevelop the Cohen Stadium site, which is adjacent to your campus out in the northeast part of the city. Through that public outreach, we heard very loud from the community of what some of the uses of the development, what they wanted to see out there. They wanted to see entertainment, they wanted to see recreational open space type of development. And so we've been pursuing and working with economic development to attract a master developer as well as tenants to the site. And we've had multiple conversations with various entities throughout this process. And we wanted to give the community college, the board, an update of where we're at, and then start talking about some potential partnerships as we move forward with the development. Very familiar with the site. This is one of our biggest selling points to potential developers and tenants. When you look at the Cohen site, the connectivity there with Route 375, 54, it's really centralized from a regional perspective to the city. So it's got great access to the highways and to any part of the city. You can get there within 20-25 minutes.
Great place for a ball club.
Remember that Chair Haggerty, that is his district as well.
Again, just to give you an idea, the travel times to the new hospital, we're looking at 15 minutes. From the airport, 14 minutes. It really got great connectivity to the ports of entry as well. The Bridge of the Americas leads right up to the Cohen site. This is the site of the master plan that was developed and what we've been sharing with the potential master developers. We do have a website, cohenep.com, that shares a lot of the information to the master plan, the public outreach, and a lot of the documents that we're using to attract a developer. Again, we're looking at entertainment. We're looking at open space, a park area. We're also looking for potential office tenants. So this would be office space or shared workspace type of scenario.
Is it a mixed use development?
It would be no housing. So the community was very clear through the public outreach that they don't want to see additional housing. And I know originally we talked about the 30 acres that the EPCC owns, that we potentially do future student housing with as a second phase or of the development in the future. But that's, as part of this development, we would not do housing, but everything else we did.
Whereabouts is the college located on that?
I have a map that will show you, I can read it real quick. So the map, the EPC site is actually right to the south of this, the good campus in the northeast. Again, a couple of the other items that we're pursuing, we're looking at big open space plaza area. This would be a field that would be multi-purpose for either sporting events, it would be for concerts, the type of amphitheater with a hotel, and then a lot of retail space with parking structure.
Can it be the field be used for soccer?
Absolutely.
There it
I'm not
is.
sure where I'm getting a lot of dots on here with the text. The font? Okay, it's a font issue. Again, that open space is intended to be for concerts, sporting events, with a hotel in the background and having a second deck and open areas that would open up to the plaza area. We really envision that to be a gathering place for the community. We also have funded through the city a media studio where we're proposing to use that in school districts and in EPCC to host a media type of setup for broadcast, for producing media type of content. And I apologize. Yeah, I'm not sure what's happening with the font. But just to give you an idea as far as where the city owns the 50 acres that's outlined here, community college owns everything to the south. There's about 30 acres that's north of Burn Springs, and that's one of the items that I'm going to talk to the board about as well today. I apologize. We're also building the water park. If you haven't been out there, the stadium's already gone. The water park's under construction. We're scheduled to open that this summer. It is a themed water park. It's going to have 3 major slides as part of the entrance area, a lap pool, like a lounge pool area with an in-water playground, lazy river, a little kiddie pool area in the back, a eating area, concessions. It's going to have music. It's going to have nighttime views with lights. And part of the master development, we've designed it to where the main promenade for the overall development will be right along the park. So you'll be able to, as you're entering the facilities and the development, you'll be basically walking right by the park as well. Yeah, that gives you a better scenario kind of where we're at right now. One of the, what that's supposed to say is, one of the items that we wanted to propose to the community colleges. In the Northwest campus, we do have a shared parking use agreement for our Westside Sports Complex. We have 13 flat fields out in that part of the city, and we do have an agreement for shared use for weekend use of your parking area. The city actually contributed quite a bit of money to expand the parking lot back in 2007, 2008. And that's something that we'd like to explore with the community colleges as we move forward and we develop the site to be able to use to have a shared use parking agreement for weekend use. We anticipate that a lot of development as we develop it, during the week operations, we would have sufficient parking, but if we have special events, concerts, and those kinds of things, I think it would be very beneficial for the development to be able to make use of the parking lot that you have out there. That's one of the items that we would like to pursue and discuss further with the board. And that's the resolution that we passed for the facility down in the northwest part of the city. The other item that we wanted to talk about is Running Springs. Running Springs right now is being used like a public road. It is the community college access, a driveway basically. But we want to pursue actually developing that to an actual roadway, a city roadway, so that it can be publicly dedicated as right-of-way, provide access to the community college and obviously to the Cohen development as well.
What's that road? Is it?
It's Running Springs, that's what it's called, but it's actually a private drive. Running Springs Drive.
It's Whispering.
Whispering
Whispering
Springs.
Springs, yes.
Apologize.
Yeah.
There's a spring in there somewhere. But it is, again, it's used as a public road. Actually, there's a bus that rolls through there as well. That's part of the bus route. But I think it just makes sense when you look at the development there and the access point, the pedestrian connectivity to the community college. Once we open up the development, it will make sense that we dedicate that and build that as a public right of way. The other piece, This is, thank you up there. Read that. The other piece that we wanted to discuss with the board is when we've been talking to some of the master developers in attendance, they do ask about those 30 acres that the community college owns. And so as we move forward and start discussions with them, they've talked about what's going to happen to the 30 acres. Does the community college have any plans to develop that? If there's an opportunity to get a first right of refusal, we'll be able to discuss that with the community college. And that's something that we want to pursue at a future board meeting with you all, if that's possible.
So when you say developers, are you referring to this, who are you referring to?
So again, we're in discussions, economic development can't really disclose who we're talking to, but they have asked about those 30 acres that would be adjacent to a potential developer, to the development itself. And so that's something that we want to bring up.
With those 30 acres, are you anticipating, or is your planning involve acquiring those from the community college? If so, let me offer an alternative. I personally would be very interested in allowing us to participate on a future overriding royalty interest in the activity in this, as opposed to a one-time sign over and release of the acreage. Broad concepts, but I would be interested to find out if your MBA and money people could envision something where the community college could see an ongoing revenue stream from this acreage on an overriding royalty interest.
Take that.
Just
Yeah,
include that.
I think any option, that's certainly an option that we would discuss with you. We really wanted to kind of gauge after this today. We don't know, a master developer comes in, obviously a master developer is interested if there's undeveloped land just directly adjacent to the overall development, because, certainly that could have an impact in terms of not only the development itself, but there's also opportunities, as you're saying, with the additional 30 acres. So how that's structured, we would certainly be open to have those conversations.
I understand that. The only thing is that I just would like to see that particular option as being part of the mix, and when you look at, future possibilities of what ifs, that's a what if.
Yeah, but answer any questions, because that was kind of most.
Oh, one other thing, you're talking about the office planning. When you're talking about having office there, it seems to me that we have developing office structures going downtown and a lot of office space being built all across the town. Do you anticipate that, well, I guess it would be the master developers would anticipate, but I would hope they would be taking into consideration that there appears to be a lot of office space
There's also
coming online.
Yes, and there's also the potential for some company interest in that particular footprint as well.
So, okay.
What are you building over there at North Park? Is that apartments or is that office?
Metro 31,
Yeah, over there on North Park, Diana and Dyer.
Are we allowed to discuss that? Yes. Okay, so that's a 380 agreement that the city is executing. So we under the agreement, Hunt is building housing right now. Part of that development will also include commercial and mixed-use development that's being underway.
So you're building housing, right?
Right now, the first phase is the housing piece, but it is a mixed-use development.
Senior housing. Yes, senior housing.
Sir, our number one interest, of course, is, the college. And you said that that's 30 acres that you're looking at?
That's 30 acres that the community college owns. That's north of.
Right, but are you looking at the whole 30 acres? Because we also have to be conscious of the potential for growth in the future. And if we give up the 30 acres that we have, it's going to really limit us there. Were you looking at anything less than the 30 acres?
Again, we're not looking at something right now. We just want to engage. That's something that some of the folks that we've been talking to have asked about. What's going to happen to the 30 acres, and we wanted to, engage in further discussions about what does this community college have for future development in this area.
Yeah, it really is just that. It's really kind of understanding if there was a certain direction the community college wanted to go with that 30 acres. Because I think we've talked to more than one potential master developer, and this continues to become a topic of conversation, more along the lines of not necessarily because they have very specific things in terms of that land for development now, just understanding what options are available as they would look at the build out of the property that we already own. So it's really just that, and just to see what kind of flexibility we would have potentially in working in a partnership with you on that land more than anything else.
I think for me, my name is Christina Sanchez, I represent District 4. For me, this was a broad overview. There's some information that we know a little bit about this particular development. For me, that would be helpful to kind of understand, and of course you would probably converse this with our lawyer, and maybe this is a separate discussion that we would have, maybe an executive session in terms of a land discussion of maybe what we want to do, because I think there's a lot of ideas and options there. For me, I think what I need more clarity on, and I know how 380s, 381 agreements work for economic development incentives. It's more of a vision of what that plan is, and to see really what that leeway is in terms of our negotiation to go in there and say, okay, this is really what we want to work with and what we want to do, because maybe we can get a better sense of what that developer wants to do as well, so to mesh those ideas. I don't necessarily think, and I'm not speaking for the whole board, that I'm, not in favor of or not moving forward with this. I think this is exciting. I'm happy to see that this particular land and this development is up and coming and moving along. Absolutely, how the community college can take advantage, how we can invest in the college that's there, that's close. And really looking at maybe some of the student opportunities that are there. So I think it's a little bit more of a robust discussion than maybe the land, but really once an agreement is executed, how can we maybe even tie that in to some of the programs that we have for our students? Either hospitality, food industry, I don't know, but that's what I need to be able to really kind of come up with that plan and have that discussion, but not completely shutting it down as well.
And I agree with you completely, because that's the other thing, we're gonna look at what benefit is there for the community college if we give up this, what can we expect, not for ourselves, but for the students that we serve. Certainly it's a very, very enticing opportunity. I have grandkids, they would love something like that to come to El Paso. And certainly we will continue the discussion if that's what the board decides, but it's not shutting it down, it's just more details on what benefits could we secure. I know we've talked a lot about apprenticeship programs, we've talked a lot about athletics, different options that would be of benefit to the students that we serve.
My name is John Upshur, and I'm District 1, and I think your takeaway from you're coming to say, hey, is there an interest? And I think you can. The takeaway from this would be, the board is willing to entertain further discussions. We're not shutting it down and saying, no, that's ours, and we already need that footprint. I think they've indicated, the kinds of interests, Ms. Sanchez and Dr. Graham, the kind of interests that we'd like to see, which indicates, we'd like to hear more, as opposed to the takeaway. You don't want to go. These guys don't want to go back home and say, "Forget that. We need to do something else." No, we're willing to listen.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. I think certainly there's more definition to what the overall site is eventually going to look like once we have a master developer in place. But just hearing the feedback from the board that you're open to a future discussion on how we might work together. Should there be an interest for the additional acres is very helpful.
Is this going to be a 380 agreement with the applicant?
We don't know yet.
No? Yeah, okay, so
Yeah,
maybe?
Maybe.
Okay.
We just have to kind of look at how we structure it with the developers.
For context, Mr. Rodriguez, I think there's a pointer on what you have. And so what you'll see is, obviously he has the outline in red that the city already owns. The land that's north of Whispering Springs is approximately, that's the 30 acres. And so south of Whispering Springs is an additional 10 acres that the college has as well. And then obviously the city is looking at incorporating that road to actually be a city road as well. And we'd work together on timelines. Summer is where we have the lowest enrollment. I would hope that we could get something done during the summer as opposed to a fall and spring, because even I use that road on a regular basis. But again, they're looking at the 30 acres that are above or that are north of that road if you will. And we'd still have 10 acres, plus there's additional, I've worked with the staff, there's additional footprint within the land that's south of Whispering Springs. Right now, we have portables in some of that area where we would still have the ability to continue to move forward. So 30 of the 40 that the college currently has that are not utilized right now.
Whereabouts there is the little piece that the veterans are using?
Further south, Dr. Graham, and it's right by where that new Sam's is.
Because that one is almost, that little piece is almost a non-negotiable because they've already built on there.
Yeah, and we still own it. They have built.
But it's not
we own it.
included in the 30?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, it's further south.
Bring us your best offer.
I appreciate it. Again, we wanted to gauge interest, and then we'll continue discussions with staff.
And I
Bring us your
think-
best offer.
I think future updates can be shared with Dr. Serrata, and then he'll keep us in the loop as to where we're going.
And I've met with the team, with the girls' team, probably 2 or 3 times already, and said, okay, I'm personally, I don't speak on behalf of the board, but I'm interested, and I think we're at a point where you can bring it to the board to gauge their interest, because ultimately the board would have to make that decision.
Yeah, and again, I think that certainly there'll be more definition on this once we secure the master developer.
Is this the only area where they're looking at, or do you have other sites that you're considering?
So this is a specific initiative that the city council adopted as part of the strategic plan to redevelop the Cohen Stadium. And so that's what we're targeting. And we did a lot of public outreach over 2018 to really come up with what the community wanted to see up in the Northeast, and that's what we're pursuing. We're continuing, like I said, we're going to be opening up the water park this summer, and we're continuing to have discussions with potential tenants and master developers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You guys gonna bring on some more restaurants? There ain't no place to eat out there.
No, we have one more item. There's another item posted for this meeting, so we're, yes. Roll
Okay. Number 4.2, then.
Discussion item number 4.2, Mr. Paulo Perez, Program Manager for ECM, will provide an update briefing on the progress of the Combined Fee Revenue Improvement Bonds Series 2016 program. The briefing items will include, but are not limited to, a general update including schedule and budget for all 6 projects, as well as an overall bond schedule and budget update.
And good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, board members. Mel apologizes for not being here today, but to quote him verbatim, he's sick as a dog, so unfortunately he can't be here. So starting with the project status on admission, and we are gonna hopefully already have an opportunity to look through the presentation. We'll be talking quite a bit about schedule. But mission, the positive thing about mission that's ongoing is that, like I previously stated in December, they did increase considerably the manpower. They're going very fast. They're working Saturdays and Sundays. They are, even on the plumbers, they're working 2 crews, 1 crew coming in at 4, staying till 9. So there's certainly an effort, and there's certainly some hope. That being said, we finally sat down with Flintco. They initially wrote me a letter asking for extensions, and they backed it up with the schedule fragments and all that, but asking for extension to June 25th. Of course, that wasn't going to be the case. We sat down with them. We had a good, actually for quite a few days. We went back and forth and we had several meetings. We finally agreed on substantial completion February 28th, which doesn't change what we've been talking about. The caveat on this project right now, and that's why, Dr. Serrata, I moved that way. is, as late as of yesterday afternoon, the contractor was telling us, yeah, we're gonna be substantially complete on the 28th. My professional opinion, I walked the site, I just don't see it. And so I need to be honest with you from that standpoint, that I don't see it. The good news about Mission, unlike Valle Verde, is what we have going for us is that we do have a fire marshal. They'll let us move in the furniture before we occupy. So there's some work can be going on there. We have an amazing dean that is willing to have a plan B. In other words, right now his plan is scheduling the classes. There's only 5 classes for the meeting master. It's scheduling those 5 classes somewhere else. But he has told us that within a week or 2, he could change that. So the plan right now is we're going as fast as we possibly can, if nothing else, to get a win on this thing. You know, trying to get it in for the spring meeting master. That being said, it's still out there, the possibility that's not going to happen. And so I feel compelled that I need to let you know that, despite of what the contractor is telling me right now.
So they pay us what, 2,000 a day for every day of leave?
Sir?
They pay us 2,000 a day for every day
No,
of
it's
leave?
$500 starting February 20th.
500.
Just, Dr. Strong, what happens if, I think you indicated, if I understand that, you say within 2 weeks we can change, we move the classes from one place to the other. What's the minimum amount of time that the students need to know, hey, wait a minute, I can go to Mission, but I can't go to Valle Verde to do the, to take those classes? So it's not like we're gonna retain those students, I mean.
Yeah, by and large, Mr. Exer, what we're seeing is that over time, fewer and fewer of our students are taking courses at more than one site. They're by and large trying to take all of their courses. Dr. Penley's staff has looked at this within the fact book. I'll pull that up right now. So as long as we're given the notice, then we'll let students. If it's the same campus, it's not an issue whatsoever. They just walk over to the next
So
class.
this alternate locations was on the same campus?
Correct.
Oh, okay,
Yes,
it
sir.
wasn't like.
No, within the same campus.
Okay.
That's correct.
So they don't do it by the 28th, what are you looking
$500 a day. No, right. I'm sorry.
at? What's the finish date?
Oh, the finish date right now, of course, it's to be in by the, I believe it's, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's May 23rd. No, March 23rd for the meeting master to start.
Right there in the blue.
Oh, yeah, it is, yeah. Just make sure I can remember. It's 23rd.
Okay, so it's not gonna happen, so where are we moving that to?
Well, that's what I was trying to get at. The dean already has a place for them.
I understand. I understand the dean and the classes, I
Yes.
got it. When are they gonna finish the building?
Oh, okay.
That's my question.
Okay, right now, based on what the contractor is telling, they'll be done. Based on what we're thinking, it'll probably be another 30 days to do a good job.
So we're looking at a move-in date in April.
Yeah, I would certainly say, I've learned not to guarantee too much based on everything that's going on, but I can safely say that the summer session would be feasible. I feel pretty confident. I feel pretty confident, I don't feel absolutely confident, let me just clarify that. So, that's in itself, that's where we are, which is much better than Valle Verde, which I'll go into just a little bit.
That doesn't give me confidence if it's bad, but it's not as bad as something else you're gonna tell me about.
It's sure not in line
I'm not
with,
gonna lie to you.
Well, that's
You know,
good.
it is, I mean, unfortunately, that's the case, you know, and it's something that we're constantly trying but unfortunately, the way the market is right now, I'm amazed, to be honest, that Politico has been able to gather the kind of support they've been able to get from the subs, particularly since they only have this project in town, and they're from out of town.
But out of all that, I would like the assurance from BCM that the quality of the out-of-town people.
That absolutely,
is,
absolutely.
because
That we have control of. We have
three
control.
bad workers will screw up what one good
Yes, sir,
worker does.
absolutely, and that's an outstanding point, because we do have control over budget, we do have control over the quality of the product. So yes, that I feel I feel confident that we can.
Is that the industry norm, $500 a day?
No, well, it depends. It varies a lot. I know with the system was 1,500. It really also depends on the amount of of the amount of the building itself. Like if it's a $70 million building, a lot of it depends also on how important it is to have it done. I can give you an instance, like with UTEP, for the new residence hall, we actually, but it has to be substantiated, and we actually did the calculations how much it would cost to put a student, it was a residence hall, so how much it would cost to put a student in a hotel, how much it cost for transportation back and forth, and we actually incorporated into the liquidated damages. So liquidated damages were like $5,000 a day. But we actually on the RFQ itself, or RFP, we actually listed, here's the expenses the college will, and if they're not done by this date, here's what the cost is going to be to the college. So as such, we'll be charging. But that's unusual, though at least from my experience, most of the time.
Yeah, and the problem, Judge, could be if you have your liquidated damages be too high, it could constitute a penalty. And under Texas law, the liquidated damages would not be. You would have an issue. They would come back and just claim that it's a penalty, and it'd be unenforceable for you to be able to recover those. So that's the problem. The issue becomes at the time that you're negotiating, you have to ascertain more or less what your prospective damages would be, and they can't be too high, because if they're too high when you do your liquidated damages, then
I'm just asking. We're stuck at $500 a day. I understand that. Again, 25 years ago, we got a plan for the next time that it's more like $1,000.
that's exactly right.
And everybody knows that up front. But unfortunately, what happens is we only do this about every 10 years, and everybody in this room will probably be retired in 10 years.
Not you, Judge.
I know, but that's why I keep bringing this up. 25 years ago, if we would have planned it right, we wouldn't be in this situation. Got it.
But the one for the public schools is higher, isn't it? Than 500.
Honestly, I don't recall.
I think it's 1,000 a day, if I remember.
It could be. It could be. I mean, it's not that it's not that unusual to see the $1,000–$1,500 range. But if you go much more than that,
it depends on the project.
500 to me, it seems awful low.
It is. But the other thing you have to consider too, and I'm sure you agree with me, then what it starts happening, actually I'll give you a perfect example. The Rio Grande project. Remember how we had an alternate to finish it earlier? That alternate coincidentally was the amount of days of liquidated damages, because they knew they couldn't do it. So if they come in and don't realize they can do it by that day, all they're going to do is increase their bid by that amount, so they'll be covered, and then if they do it, it's extra money on their pockets. But typically, that's kind of that's at least what I'm familiar with, that kind of strategy. Unless they're really, really hungry. But right now, that's just not.
Well, so far you're not coming in on time and under budget.
I'm coming under budget. Yeah.
Under budget?
Yeah. And technically, I am coming in on time, except on Valle Verde, because we do have justified change orders to extend the time. So from that standpoint, but Valle Verde is truly not on time, yes. And to be honest, again, I had this discussion with Tom this morning, because he's saying we have to have solutions, to bid. Yeah, but the solutions that we have right now, and then I mentioned this to Tom, the solution we have right now is fire them. Well, if you fire them, you gotta get the bonding company, come right back and find the cheapest contractor they can, and you just lost 4 or 5 months in the process. The other one is throw money at it, which I wouldn't do. It's not your fault you're behind. And the other one is bring your own forces, in which case you'll have a nightmare in terms of insurance and liability, and probably even pay more. So in my mind at least.
We're not in the construction.
Pardon?
We're not in the construction.
I know, exactly. So it's a little bit of a dilemma for us, because yeah, we try everything we can to control the schedule, we really do, but we don't have control of it, if that makes any sense. So now the budget, for instance, now you're sitting on $4 million. We're doing really good, because we actually can manage that. We can tell, no, we won't pay this, or no, you're going to have to go down. We're actually right now, I'm having ours in our office looking. We've saved you a lot of money just on going over each change order. So I feel as bad as y'all do. I was on your side for 28 years representing the owner, so I know how you feel. I feel terrible about it. But we do everything we can. And unfortunately, our hands are tied by what the contract allows us to do.
And who got this contract? Who got this part?
Sir?
Who got the project? Who's the construction on it?
Oh, on this one is
For
Flint,
the
so
Cinco.
Valle Verde is HB, and then Rio Grande is Arrow, is a local one. Flintco is actually from Albuquerque. They have offices in Austin, and but I am very surprised because they're they only have one project in town, and they're able to draw all these local subs, so which is great. But I don't know what they're doing, but it's working. But even so, you can still see.
Well, the building's looking nice.
Fantastic. Oh, I walked it the other day. And Valle Verde, I'm telling you, when Valle Verde is done, it's going to really look good. But
That's the question. It's done.
that's the qualifier. Yeah. So, any other questions on missions?
So you're looking more than that it will be finalized before the 23rd or after the 23rd
Right
of
now,
March?
what we're looking, here's where the caveat is right here. See, right now, there's 2 days only to go ahead and start moving the furniture. So literally, we'll have to move the furniture here, start moving the furniture here, and they can be working at the same time. So as we do that now, they might not, they have a tendency sometimes with that's why you want to avoid putting furniture at the same time they're working, because they'll get on top of the furniture to get on the ceiling. And I mean, there's going to be, and the punch list will probably be longer. But the bottom line is, right now, it's their mission. They're standing by it, is getting the kids there, the students there by the spring meeting master. That's their mission. I just sitting outside, just walking the building, just looking at it. I have, even with the kind of manpower, that parking lot is full. But even with the manpower they have, I don't see it. I just don't see it, yeah. But I hope that they make me wrong.
It might surprise you.
Pardon? Yeah.
It might surprise.
That would be wonderful. So, and here, this is gonna, you're gonna see this in all of them. There's definitely a big hit when it gets to Christmas. So, the payment, see, there's a little slip there. But I was guaranteed that this is really gonna close once they start moving things. Rio Grande. So, this project, they're moving well, very steady. This is the 6th floor, so this is the first occupied space. So they will basically like 7 floors. They like this one, which makes 6th floor, and then the 7th floor slab, there's 3 more floors, and then 3 more for the roof. And then they'll be done. Well, done with the structure. Yeah. So this, I thought this was an interesting picture, so you can kind of have an idea of what's going on here. So this picture is taken earlier than this one. So what we have right here is a 5-inch slab, like you have in the parking, all the other floors below. But now, because it's an occupied space, we need insulation in it. So we're adding in a 3-inch thickness of insulation in there, and then they can come in on top of that. I'll take it back. That's 4 inches on top of it with a 3-inch slab. So that's why this one's going to take a little longer. The first one. Now the other ones won't have that, because then you're in the climatized space. So we'll move on. They did just start the installation of the barrier cables. You know, those little cables that will keep the car from going off the side. Now on this one, I left there where it is, but I do again, I have to tell you what's going on. And so we got a schedule from the contractor, and right now, most of you probably know David Rawlings, and he's being the project manager in this project. He's analyzed the schedule, and he's just, what he did is he took what their progress has been and plugged it in on the schedule, and he looks like they're about 5 weeks behind. And that in and of itself, it's not that bad. What I'm getting at is we're going to need to meet with the contractor. So we're trying to actually arrange a meeting with the owner, because the concern is there's a couple of items that they found the logic of the schedule doesn't make sense. And so that could indicate even further delays. On top of that, if you look, this one really shows, see how it was going real good and now it's starting to slightly go out? This is one of the cases that really gives us a little indication that to be in our radar. Because you think about, well, you have 7-8 months, well, that's not that long. So in particular, we need 2 finished floors to go, completely finished. And don't forget, we still got the equipment, all the furniture. So all that being said, we are working to try to see what they can do. the issue with Arrow, they're very good contractors, good quality, but they're very tight too. They can't seem unable to get more people, and we have to push that. You know, you need to bring more, maybe change the sequence, and David in our office is real good about that as far as coming up with solutions. So we're gonna sit down with them and propose some options on that, but just a little heads up that it's starting to get on the radar. Now, this one, is May 23rd, 2018, something like that, at the board meeting in May of 2018. And a lot of you may remember, the new members probably certainly don't remember, but what happened on that is we went out to bids for the project, the Rio Grande, and at the last minute, the architect put this, it's kind of our artistic interpretation of the city. Basically, what they were saying at the time is, okay, here's the mountains, here's where Rio Grande's gonna be, and then we're gonna have all these lights to indicate City of El Paso, and then where the other campus would be another light, maybe a different, which was an interesting concept. Y'all were open to it, so we left it in. Now, 6 months ago, we really started looking closer. They started doing more mock-ups and things like that. And this is a prototype, so this hasn't been done before. And he's really starting making us nervous, particularly on long-term maintenance. They kept on going back and forth. They really want us, the architects, the contractors really, they really don't care, but the architects really are trying to, because it is an interesting feature, but what they couldn't prove to us is that, yeah, it might look great when the building opens, you take the pictures, but 2-3 years from now, it starts getting water penetration in there, and then Mr. Lovati's stuck with trying to fix this. Maybe half the lights stay on, the other half don't. So.
But he's good.
Oh, he's very good. But so what, in consultation with EPCC staff and administration, we decided to pull it off.
And what was the price tag on it?
50,000. So we'll get 50,000 back.
Well, what are we gonna replace it with?
That. It's gonna be really what it looked like to begin with. This is what you always have approved. This was a last minute change right before the bid that the architecture kind of squeezed in, but it's never been there. So basically we revert back to what actually even the neighborhood saw. The neighborhood never did see those lights. You know, the historical. So
I know, wow.
So the bottom line is we're sticking with what we had all along. And so as an information.
Well, can we put the EPCC seal there?
We did. See, actually, this
there is a little itty bitty one.
It's funny you say that because we had a huge one, and everybody said, "No, this is way too overpowering. This is at the pedestrian level."
Everybody, because I think that's free advertisement to have the name.
No, but really, we certainly can change it back up. We can make. Oh, I know what it was. Actually, there was more. It was. I'm sorry, Rick. Actually, the one key thing to this one is the signs that go on this side, this sign, this side. The city only allows up to a certain amount of square feet. That's what it was. Yeah.
No, but I'm talking about right there where you took off the lights.
On the
right there.
Yeah, why can't we have a big EPCC?
Because there's a certain, for signs, there's a certain allowable square footage that the city will allow us. And that, now that I remember, that actually, that was one of the main reasons. First of all, it was too overbearing, but also, when you add the square footage for this, and these ladders there, that's about all you can afford. In terms of signs.
City standards.
City standards, right. So that's what it was, but we felt good about it because it's more of a pedestrian scale. It's kind of, you're walking by this huge seal, and it's going to be like clear anodized, so it's going to be pretty sharp, and it's expensive too. I think.
But you can't see anything at night, and you can on the side, but not on the front of the building.
Right. Actually, so you'll know, Mr. Gallardo and I had a conversation yesterday. We asked an architect to look in it because I really think that will look nice backlit, where it says EPCC.
Yeah,
See,
but you
right
said
now,
it
it's
wasn't
not-
gonna be.
Right, but we're reconsidering that, at least I
Okay.
asked architects to give us a cost, because I think it really look neat.
It shouldn't be that expensive to put lights on there.
Anyway, so we're gonna try to do that, and hopefully it won't be too much, and maybe we're willing to do that. So Now, Valle Verde.
The elephant in the room.
Yeah, it's a big elephant. It's just to give you an idea of what we've been going through. So if you recall, at the last meeting in December, I was fairly excited. Remember, I told you I downgraded from cautiously optimistic to hopeful. Now I'm not even hopeful. I know it's not gonna happen. So, but the bottom line is, at the time, they brought in a lot of people. They said they were gonna bring a national firm from Arizona. Well, none of that apparently panned out. The guys from Arizona were too busy, they couldn't come. They did hire some additional electricians, and they hired some additional people, but they're really unable to maintain. So at the time, we met early January with the COO for HB, and he told us, he said, I have to level with you guys, there's no way we're gonna do it for the mini master. And I told him, tell me something I don't know. But basically, the bottom line on that was that's where we were. Subsequently, last Friday, I get an email with finally a schedule, because they hire somebody that's not part of HB to do the schedule. And the schedule indicated a substantial completion of May 14th. So my response back to them was saying, well, I'm gonna have to tell the board that we're not gonna make the summer session, and that's not gonna go real well, but based on where we are, that's where you are. They called me, the project director called me about an hour before I was heading over here, saying, Paulo, to be honest, we're not even gonna make that day. So I had already envisioned that, and that's why I already had the presentation prepared, and I'm already putting fall, because I just honestly.
And these guys are local?
Sir?
Are they
No,
local?
they're from New Mexico.
Not Mijares, more.
Oh, Mijares, again, they don't have control over the schedule.
Yeah, but he's local.
Yeah, he is.
He's busy building schools,
We're
so
local.
that's why they don't have time to finish.
Well, no, but they're done from the standpoint. The architect just manages now it's
He just
going a
draws the
little lower.
pictures.
And let me tell you what else is happening too. I've been getting some emails, there's some internal disputes with the subs. And wanting to go to arbitration. So all the indication I get is.
The subs at this location?
Yes, sir. So all the indications we're getting, if anything, we're gonna slow down even a little more. Now, the good news, kind of the good news.
And that one's also 500 only?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And that, they've been notified. The day that, see, right now, actually, let me show this real quick. See, that stays 0. Because the bottom line is the substantial completion date right now is December 19th and hasn't changed. So on December 19th, I wrote an email saying informally on liquidated damages, he's giving me $500 a day, But the bottom line is, they're just gonna have to pay more money. I mean, the longer it goes, but again, like you just said, it's not for them, it's probably a drop in water, but that's all the recourse we have.
You don't foresee them walking away and we have to go to the bonding company?
I do not. Now, I better not say. I'm not saying this with 100% certainty. I don't think so, but because you never know with these guys. But no, I don't think. The answer is no. And part of the reason is, again, talking to that project director before I came here. What they're doing, right? You see, I think this is where all the problems begin. They were maintaining about 50 people and they needed 100. And so this is when we had our meeting in December. I was telling, hey, look how great this is. They got a lot more people, and they kept that for a little while. But then this is Christmas, which is to be expected. But the good news, and I got assurances against, take it for what's worth, from the COO, that they still accelerating. They hired another electrical subcontractor, and they hired another one for low voltage. So they're, in these words, they're not giving up. So they're doing better than what they were doing. It's just not enough. But it's still, at least they're not 20 people on site, because that's the thing that sometimes you get nervous, and they just give up and just leave a few, and they're done when they're done. They're still trying.
How often do you visit that project?
Once a week at least, and we got a guy that every day. We have a project manager that's there every day. So right now, this is what we're looking at, and I do have a qualifier, Dr. Serrata, because I realize, I'm showing it all the way here because I'm talking about the school being semester. Now, the next meeting, I'm talking about the fall, will be right here in high confidence, because now we moved the goalposts, you know, so. Anyway, so, and again, you see the dip here, you see another dip here for December, that's not necessary. Now, finally, on some good news, we do have a grand opening for Northwest coming out, and hopefully everybody will be there. Very excited about it, looks beautiful.
And who's the construction on this one?
They'll Aztec, and they're local, and they weren't very big, but they're really growing fast. They just stole our better product.
If I hire them, I have to go to the bonding company to finish up.
Well, you know, if the bonding company could do that, and they were very good at getting subs in. You know, they made a major effort there at the end to get it done. There's still things, trust me, there's still things we still need to address. But, and I think somehow it's gonna be what mission's gonna be. We're gonna get if we get the bodies in there, we're still gonna need to go back and correct a few things.
Here?
Yes, sir, we are having to do that now, yes, sir.
You haven't had a punch list yet, Rick? No punch list?
The punch list, we received the final punch list yesterday, and it's impressive.
I don't think you meant it as a compliment.
I didn't mean it.
Okay, impressive in that there's a lot left to do.
There is a lot left to do. Not, I should say, lot to correct still, things that have been done completely. But they've been identified, and they will be tracked down.
Nothing major?
Pardon?
Nothing major?
No, nothing. Well, we do have one air handling unit that's not operating correctly, but they have parts on order, and that should be in a week or two, and they'll get that going. That's probably the most major issue. And controls being set.
Summer's coming.
Oh, I know. No, they better, how long did you say?
I think the parts are in a couple of weeks, and we should be able to get that unit running. It's running right now, but it's making a lot of noise.
Oh, okay. All right. And okay, good news. We just passed 500,000 mark in safety and no incidents. So that's always wonderful. The current project schedule planner, again, updated just to reflect what the known numbers are right now. The budget update, we are sitting right now at 4.2 million contingency. But the budget really hasn't changed that much at all. This is both published on, and this has not changed at all.
With that 4 million, is that are we gonna need that to finish off Alberta, or will the bonding company pay for all the expenses?
Oh, if you're talking about like on Valley View, if we.
Yeah, we don't have to have any.
Let's say the bonding comes in, we got within the project, we retain a certain amount of money. As when we retain, whenever the contractor submits for payment, we hold back 5%.
So you have a bundle of money somewhere.
Exactly. So that in and of itself wouldn't complete the project. But what it does is at least gives us a little cushion, because completing the project would be the bonding company.
Yeah, but they will pay.
Sir?
We don't have to come up.
No, the bond company will be responsible for it. And of course, they want to save as much money as they can, so they will try to find somebody that's not as expensive. But overall, and keep in mind, this 4 million will go down. Right now, it's where we are, but we still got the Rio Grande is a big one that still needs to go. We should be fairly, actually on Valle Verde, we still got a number of change orders to process. And some as far back as April. And see, we tell them, but we can't force them. And actually, I asked them if they were independently wealthy, because it's a lot of money we're gonna own them, but they're just, and being able to provide all the backup. But there is quite a bit of money that's still gonna come out of Valle Verde. But overall, we're good. We're sitting good. Action items. So when the Mission El Paso project began, the architects included in there a specification that was adequate for what we have. But there's been some technology improvements that the police really requires and should have. And namely, some NVRs, they're fairly expensive. And what we did is I probably should read this first. Basically, to formally authorize the college president and his staff to procure security equipment and associated installation from Matrix Special Systems in the amount not to exceed $126,500, which includes a 10% contingency for the Mission El Paso Classroom Lab Building Construction Project. This contract will be awarded through ESC Region 19 Cooperative Contract Numbers 157122 and 177221, as allowed by the Texas Education Code 4431. Such contracts are competitively awarded.
Security, is this super whippy dippy locks on the door, or?
No, this is cameras, mostly cameras and recording equipment for security. And what it is, and this will give you a good idea of what we're talking about. So, Matrix, there's only two, Reliatex and Matrix, two local folks that can install the equipment required by the EPCC. The contractor, when they hire the sub, they didn't hire one of these two. So in order to get these guys would be a lot more money, because we pay now interest we pay added cost for the overhead, and we also would have to pay to the sub, because this is a third tier sub. So in our minds, okay, let's get a proposal from these guys, let's pull whatever they have there, which is 78,000 out. So the project will just go to contingency, basically for all those improvements you saw. We're gonna take 36 or 75. It's under 50, but the reason we need to bring it in is because the contract for Matrix, right here, it's for 115,000, so it's over 50, but the project contingency will only be deducted, reduced by 336,075. Does that make sense?
It is basically replacing one company with another.
Yeah, but improve the quality of the equipment, which is obviously a big deal.
So the specs weren't up to that one.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And who came up with this idea to get them?
Well, and that's part of the deal, because what was put out for bid didn't include like these NVRs. They're like $25,000 a piece. It's like the digital recorders. And so, in order to have this equipment installed, there's only two companies that can do it. So when the contractor put a bid in, this equipment wasn't part of what was being bid. So it was a different brand of recorder, and which doesn't work with what's required. Yes, sir. So this could have been a bigger hit, because if we went back, and besides, it'll just give them another excuse to delay it more, and this way we're taking this excuse away from them. But this would have definitely been more, because this way the college dealing directly with the sub. If we did it with the contractor, we'd have to pay the contractor's markup, the electrical sub's markup, and the markup which we already paying for these guys.
It's kind of like the tile deal, we did it ourselves.
And it's gonna be monitoring all this equipment.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Lovato, the NVR will be on site. It's eventually, I think they're planning on trying to do it 100%.
When it comes to that stuff, you
Oh, okay.
probably
But I believe it's only gonna be on site.
So it's monitored by the bid.
Okay, by the police or?
That's right.
And does that include purchasing whatever they need?
It does.
Environments?
The effort here is to buy something that works with the existing system.
And do we have that in all the other campuses? So how many screens do they have?
I've been in there, I was there maybe 6-7 years ago, and 2-3 dozen.
Yeah.
And that was several.
Is it monitored 24/7?
Yes. Dispatch is there 24/7.
Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion passed. Thank you. That's it?
Yes, sir.
Motion to adjourn, Judge?
Make a motion that we adjourn?
Second. All in favor? Aye.
8 minutes.